Still a ways to go before we are truly in football season, but the NFL never stops, does it? It's why we have Lions beat reporter from the Detroit News, Nolan Bianchi, here with us. Nolan, the NFL draft was this weekend, 7 picks, 7 rounds. What did you think of the Lions haul? How would you grade it?
Well, I hesitate to put a true grade on it just yet. That's one thing that Brad Holmes has been pretty insistent about. You can't really grade a draft up until 3 years after the fact. And, I think we've learned by now that a lot of these Brad Holmes drafts aren't necessarily that well received in the time compared to the consensus boards and what people might think is the value they got. But I think they got a lot of really good players. I mean, you look at the first round pick, Tyleik Williams. His stats don't necessarily jump off the page, but he was an excellent run defender in college. And, he kind of explained to us he didn't really get the opportunity to rush the passer at Ohio State just because of the scheme they played. So everybody, the reaction to that was, oh, they drafted a defensive lineman, but they didn't get a pass rusher. Well, I don't necessarily know that that's true. I think that that's something that he's going to be able to grow into at the next level. We talked to his college coach. He said the same thing. You look ahead to days 2 and 3. They got younger on the interior offensive line. I'm fascinated by what this, training camp battle is going to look like between Tate Ratledge, the 2nd-round pick from Georgia, Miles Frazier, the 5th-round pick from LSU, who was great value, a projected middle round guy. And then, of course, you have Graham Glasgow, the incumbent starter, and you also have Christian Mahogany, a rookie last year, who stepped in for 2 games, and he was excellent. So that was kind of my big takeaway. They got younger in the trenches. They got some high upside players. Isaac Tesla, the wide receiver from Hudsonville, in the 3rd round there. I'm super fascinated by his upside. One of the most athletic wide receivers to ever enter the NFL draft, and same can actually be said for Ratledge in terms of his relative athletic score. So I'm super excited to see what these guys do. They got a couple good special teamers on day 3, and they also got the guy who I thought had one of the best post-draft interviews I've ever been a part of, and Ahmed Hassaning from Boise State. He was absolutely electric. He's got a great story. Moved here from Egypt in 2018. Didn't learn what football was until 2019. He was 4th in all of FBS last season in pressures. So a productive guy with a serious mentality, and the upside is definitely there. He's not a perfect prospect, but a ton of room to grow. And as always, I leave a Brad Holmes draft intrigued.
Well, whether people like it or not, Brad Holmes always tells us he doesn't want to draft strictly based on need. So as a combination, perhaps, of need on the depth chart and opportunity, who do you see from this list as being ready to play and make an impact right away?
I think it's going to be Tyleik Williams, the 1st-round pick that I was just talking about. He has a little bit of a clearer opportunity to a starting path just because of the fact that Lee McNeil is not going to be ready to start the season at defensive tackle. When we talked to Holmes, he said, this guy reminds me a lot of Lee McNeil, who, by the way, just became one of the highest paid defensive tackles in the league last season. So I think I'm super intrigued to see what he does in training camp, how much he's able to grow, how much of that untapped potential as a pass rusher is able to come to life early on in those practices. But in terms of just the depth chart, I think he's got a clear path. And then I think one of these guards, like I just mentioned, Tate Ratledge, Miles Frazier, one of those guys I think is going to have an opportunity to grab a starting position. We're not sure what's going to happen with Graham Glasgow. He struggled a little bit last season, and it kind of sounds like they were dying to get younger at that position. But as I mentioned before, if you go into this draft and you only end up with one guard, you can kind of look at the writing on the wall maybe a little bit for Glasgow. Now maybe he bounces back. We'll have to wait and see. But you look at what appears to be the writing on the wall for him. You look at what Christian Mahogany did as a rookie in a very limited sample size last year, and you can kind of figure it out like, oh, that might be the most likely combination is Mahogany and Ratledge. But then they come in on day 3 and they end up drafting Miles Frazier, who some of the national experts that I really trust they had Frazier ranked ahead of Ratledge. So those two guys had become tight during the draft process. They worked out together down in Frisco, Texas, under legendary O-line coach Duke Manyweather. And I think they're both going to have a really good opportunity to grab a starting job.
So you mentioned how those two train together. Ratledge, I love this, is a self-proclaimed dirtbag. Maybe that's a different dialect, but that sounds a lot like grit to me. You've got 3 teammates from the University of Georgia. How important is culture fit to this team?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything, and that was kind of what I was alluding to, even with the edge rusher Ahmed Hassanin. He got on the post draft interview and he said, I'm ready to die on the football field for Dan Campbell. And it might be a little extreme, we don't want that, but just the mentality with these guys that they've drafted is so clear. And it's actually funny because when Brad Holmes drafted Christian Mahogany a year ago, we were like, oh, what do you like about him? And he's like, he's just a dirtbag. And that is as flattering of a comment as you can get for an interior offensive lineman. And it's funny because that actually came up during Tate Ratledge's NFL Combine interview. And he said, yeah, absolutely. I consider myself one of those. Well, now you end up with a few of those guys on the interior offensive line. But I mean, just talking Tyleik, just talking, the guys I just mentioned, all these guys, it kind of smacks you right in the face a little bit when you talk to them of like, okay, these are Brad Holmes guys. These are guys who are going to continue to uphold that culture that they built over these last 4 or 5 years.
Things that you can say in football that you just can't say anywhere else. We heard a little bit of that this weekend for sure. And look, it took until the weekend, day 3, for the Lions to get that edge rusher that everybody was clamoring for. Does that tell you something about the faith they have and the progress Aiden Hutchinson has made?
It's tough to say. I mean, I think Brad Holmes has consistently gone best player available in his drafts. And, I do think they might be separate, but I do think the Lions do have a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to return to form. We've talked with some decision makers a couple times over the course of this offseason. We talked to new defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard at the Combine. We've talked to Dan Campbell a couple times. We've talked to Brad Holmes a couple times. Each time it seems that the Aiden Hutchinson question has come up in terms of how he'll be able to recover. And so far, no signs of concern. Now, I don't necessarily know if they would hint if they were concerned about him maybe not being able to return to the player that he was. But, I mean, this is a player who, by all accounts, and from what we can see, just puts the absolute most work into his body, into his recovery, into all of those things. And that's why I think he's had so much growth over these last couple of seasons. And if you just apply what he's done to become one of the best, if not, top 3, top 1 edge rusher in the league. That's what he was to the first couple of games last year. And you kind of give the transitive property to, okay, well, that's probably how he's going to attack his rehab. I wouldn't think there's any reason for concern in terms of how he's going to come back next year.
That is good to hear. And before we let you go, you made this observation on social media last night, and I think a lot of people are in agreement. Training camp is going to be a war. So when you look at this draft haul, when you look at this roster, where is the biggest battle going to be for the Lions?
Well, like I keep going back to the offensive guard position, but you just drafted 2 guys who I think in a world, if only one of them was drafted, I think both of them probably could have really competed for one of those starting guard spots. Now you got 2 of them, plus a guy last year who looked really promising, plus a veteran incumbent starter. But you look elsewhere. I mean, the defensive line I think is going to be fascinating because you bring in Tyleik, you have that open opportunity with Aleem being out. Levi Onwuzurike is coming back. Mekhi Wingo, who was a 6th-round pick last year, also showed a little bit of promise. He's going to be fighting for his own spot, and I really think the trenches are going to be a lot of fun to watch. But then you look at the wide receiver position where Isaac Tisla is, hoping to make his mark early, but not the most productive receiver at Arkansas over the last 2 seasons, but the traits kind of jump out at you. The athleticism, like I mentioned, can he jump up into wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3? It's going to be hard to jump over Tim Patrick, the veteran who was really good for them last season. But ultimately, this guy just has the traits, and it seems like he's got the grit, the hustle, and all that other type of stuff that I think can really give him a chance to take meaningful snaps next season.
we finally got some beautiful weather. I don't want to rush it, but there's an awful lot to look forward to with this Lions season, isn't there? Go read Nolan over at the Detroit News. Thank you so much for joining us, man.